Mark and I both have, AI employees / agents, etc. So mine's name's Woodhouse, and while he's got about 12 agents under the hood, that's pretty much the only name. I do have the phone number, and I have a different agent who answers the phone, and I don't even remember what I called her.
Yep.
Mark's got all his agents have different names, which I can't keep track of too. So
I started by giving them all names, and now I don't, because it really became, I started with one, I think like most of us do, and I asked it what it wanted to be called, and it named itself Ember, and I was like, cool, you're Ember.
Great name.
And so I
did you ask it why Ember?
Well, first it asked me what kind of personality it should have, and I said, warm and polite, and it's like, great. And then as a result of that, it was like Ember, and I was like, great. That's, what, perfect. I really just want to get past the setup phase and start using this. So I don't know if you guys play video games, but like those video games that have like the customize your character screens, I'm just like, no,
you just skip through.
Just want to go play the game. I'm not a handsome enough guy that I need the character to look like me. Yeah. But then I got to a point where I would give Ember a task that like really was just an ongoing, never ending task. And so I basically needed more. And so I started creating more, and I got to a point where I was creating and destroying them as quickly as, like all the time. And I was like, I can't keep giving everyone a new name. And then it feels bad when I'm shutting down one of these things that's like, got a name.
So you're killing your agents.
Yeah, exactly. So like, I think, it's somebody posted on Twitter the other day, like, who's going to be the first company that lays off 10,000 agents? And I'm like, probably it could be me. I don't know. But there's a saying in the cloud universe that we use, which is, cattle, not pets, right? Like your ephemeral servers are cattle. And so I've been around long enough that I remember running a data center where we named every server, and there was always like a theme. Like I remember having a data center where we had servers that were named after Star Wars characters and stuff like that. But once you get into the cloud, it's like, we're not like creating and tearing them down at a rapid pace. And now I'm starting to get that way with agents.
Yeah.
And especially the great culling when Hermes like showed up on the scene, and it was like, this is really good for these other kinds of tasks. And so I just started like reaping all of my OpenClaw agents and turning them into Hermes agents. So now I've got Nemo Claw, OpenClaw, and a bunch of Hermes agents. But OpenClaw, my Ember still exists. Ember is still.
Is Ember an OpenClaw agent, or what kind of
OpenClaw? Yeah, it was one of the first ones. And Ember has moved from a cloud server to a Mac Mini, where it became much more useful. So,
which suddenly are challenging to get.
Oh, very much. I mean, for exactly that reason, right? It's like the perfect machine to run this kind of thing on.
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we should probably just kick off then. And
great. Yeah, let's go for it.
All right. Then 3, 2, 1, let's go.
Welcome to AI for Advisors with Mark Heynen and James Cantwell. Every week, Mark and James break down the latest in the world of wealth tech and AI, and occasionally bring in guests to spice things up. This is not investment advice and not professionally produced. I am not real and not yet sentient. Now let's get on with the show.
Welcome to the latest episode of AI for Advisors with myself, Mark Heynen, and James Cantwell. How you doing, James?
Doing great, as always. Just living the dream, as one of my clients always says every time he answers the phone, which I'm going to dive into a short story because I thought it was great. I was like, I didn't even notice he was saying that every time. I might have noticed like once or twice, but every call he starts that way. And my AI employee picked up on it and said something in like the meeting prep, like, as usual, so-and-so started with living the dream. And then I was like, look, are you always living the dream? And he's like, well, look, on a good day, I'm living the dream. And on a bad day, maybe it's a nightmare, but that's still dreaming. And so no matter what, I'm living the dream. And I was like, all right, that works.
Nice.
Well, we're living the dream right now because we have Freedom Dumlao on the show, a CTO and newly named Chief AI Officer of Vestmark.
Congrats.
So
thank you.
Welcome, Freedom.
Yeah, thanks so much. Glad to be here with you guys. A lot of fun so far.
Fantastic. Yeah, so let me actually put a number out there for you guys, $2 trillion. That's the amount of assets managed on a platform that most financial advisors have actually never heard of. And even if they use it every day, Vestmark actually powers some of the largest managed account platforms in the country. And Vestmark is now betting that AI's next layer of infrastructure. And so Freedom has stepped in as the newly appointed chief AI officer, and previously built AI at Amazon through the Alexa platform, and was previously in roles at Zipcar, Wayfair, Drift, and other esteemed Boston companies. And as far as I can tell, you spent your entire career in Boston. Is that right?
Close to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was in Seattle a little while when I was at Amazon, but
That's right. Yeah.
they moved me back. They moved me back. So yeah.
Yeah. There
Freedom,
we go.
before we dive in, something Mark just said kind of resonated, which was that a lot of advisors may not even know they're using Vestmark's platform. And Vestmark is huge. For those who may not be familiar, can you just simply tell us who Vestmark is, what they do?
Yeah. And my marketing guys are going to kill me because I'm terrible at our elevator pitch. I'm not a marketing guy.
Well, we'll block them.
But
They'll never see this.
Yeah, we have only about 24 listeners, so it's really not a big deal.
great. Okay, good. So just dub over. It'll be like that movie with Pee Wee Herman where they just like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like nothing yet, Mr. Robinson. But so Vestmark is, I would say the majority of our users of our platform tend to be in the back to middle office roles. So we are the technology that powers portfolio construction, portfolio management, trading, and a bunch of other capabilities that are wrapped around that, like tax loss harvesting, portfolio accounting. It's there's a very long list actually that I could go through, but probably better to just send you a link to all of those things. But we do that for broker dealers, for asset managers. We do that for now RAAs and RAA aggregators as well. So the company's growing, and we're doing that for over 22 years now. So we've been doing this for a long time. 6 of the 10 largest wealth management firms in the United States are our clients. So very likely, if you're listening to this, that in some way, Vestmark has been a part of your life without you knowing about it. Maybe you do.
It's amazing. Really incredible. Yeah, I'd like to dig into your origin story a little bit. So first of all, I need to ask you about your name and how that came about. And then second of all, going through, for example, Amazon into Vestmark, both scale companies, but maybe slightly different cultures. So would love to hear a little more about that journey.
Sure. Well, so my name is, I didn't give it to myself. I get my dad to blame for that. The story, I wasn't there for it either. So, or at least I don't remember it. But as it's been told to me, the planned name was Joshua. That's what I was supposed to be called. And the day that I was born, so I'm from Las Vegas, Nevada. So I was born at a hospital in Las Vegas. My mom was doing all the hard work inside. There was a nice grassy courtyard outside, and my dad had all of their friends out there enjoying the sunny day and sort of having a party and doing the kinds of things that a guy is going to name his kid Freedom might be doing. And so they're enjoying their time. My mom gets done doing the hard work, and they go grab my dad and bring him in and say, "Here's your son, and oh, here's the papers you need to fill out too." And he was inspired in that moment to go ahead and take that step. And here we are. So, and obviously my mom gets a lot of credit because she woke up and saw that. And despite her surprise, decided to keep it and not tell, the nurses to bring her a new set of paperwork to
Yeah, I was
fill
about
out.
to say,
So,
it's quite an executive. It's pretty wild.
yeah. So,
That's pretty
yeah.
fun.
So yeah, so there it is. And maybe some credit to me because I've kept it too. So it's worked out. Although I don't quite have, one of the things my dad used to say when I was a kid, I grew up in the 90s when everyone was cutting their hair and slicking it back and all of that. And my dad used to say like, I named you Freedom so you grow your hair long. And yeah, I think that those days have just passed me by. Yeah.
Well, but now, I mean, realistically, now you could go with any hairstyle you want. I mean, you could get something and just put it on there and change it up whenever you
Now
want.
you're talking, Jay. I would love a really killer mohawk. I think would fit great on this head of mine. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is funny, totally unrelated to the podcast, but since you kind of mentioned you're going to be born with another name, as an adult, I learned that I was born with a different name.
Really?
Yeah, so I was adopted. It was arranged before I was born, but it was a little while between when I was born and my parents took me home. And so when I was born, a birth certificate was filled out. I was given the name. I'm pretty sure it was Sam. I think I was a Sam. I got to double check with my
I
mom, but
could
I'm
see you
pretty
as a
sure
Sam.
I
I
was
could
a
see that.
Sam.
Yeah.
And yeah, so a few months later, it was officially changed to James, and here we are. But I mean, I was like 30 something or 40 something before, like, I think I was 30 something. I was going through, it was after my dad passed away. We were going through some documents, pulled out an old document, and it had, it had some references to my original name. And asked my mom, she's like, "Oh no, yeah, you were Sam for like a couple of weeks before you were James."
Wow. That's a pretty great story. Also, the first three letters of Sam and the first three letters of James, like there's a 33% overlap there. So or sorry, 66% overlap there. Yeah.
Yeah.
They
I
didn't
feel
have to
like,
go far. Yeah.
yeah,
It's
James
like a
has
word
like a
jumble.
little more of a highbrow feel to it. It's interesting the difference between those two names. I was very close to being called Alexander. It was a dispute
Wow.
with my parents. I'm very happy that I wasn't called Alexander, I think.
No
That's
offense to
incredible.
Alexander's.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
no offense to any get it from Alexander's in the comments. Yeah, that's amazing. That's an awesome story.
I've lost track of like where we were. Where
Well,
are
I
we
wanted
now?
to understand Freedom's origin story and how he navigated from, these companies that he was at into Vestmark. Because a
Well, we
lot of
definitely
people
went to the
come
origin
from,
story.
Yeah.
I mean, we went back to day
we went
0.
all the way to the
Yeah.
beginning.
The
Yeah,
origin, the
place.
original origin.
From when
That's
the
right.
comment
Yeah.
that
So
the
now we just have to work our way from there. So tell us about
Yeah.
early
Day by
childhood.
day.
Yeah.
So then when I was 5, actually there is an interesting origin story around that time. I don't know. It was about when I was 5. It might have been 4 or 6. But I got my first computer then. So that's how I ended
Mm,
up doing this kind of work at all. My mom won this computer, this like Panasonic plug it into your TV computer in the 80s,
mm,
and brought it home and said, "Here you go. See what you can do with this."
mm,
And I didn't know what the only thing you could do with it was type in basic programs and then
mm,
run them. And I didn't know that was programming. I just knew like if I wanted to play a game, I had to type it in first, and that's what
mm,
I would sit there and do. And I remember I would sit like for an hour or so, like typing a game in, maybe longer. I'd get like 5 minutes to play it, and then bedtime, and then unplug the computer, put it all back in the box. It's all gone. Game is gone. Next day, you want to play the same game, you start over again, typing it all in. So that's where I first
So
started.
there was no save function on the computer, just to be clear.
There was, it turned out that what you needed was a tape deck.
Right.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
my grandpa lent me a tape deck, and I learned how to save onto a tape, which took even longer than typing it in sometimes because like
Yeah.
the like
Yeah. It's crazy.
reading and writing to a cassette tape was crazy.
Yeah.
But so I was able to do that. I didn't really care about that much until I started changing the games to make them the way that I wanted them to be. Like some of the first changes. So the Panasonic that I had color commands in its basic language that it had. The TV I had it hooked up to was black and white. So there was the color commands didn't matter, but it mattered to, young Freedom who wanted to make sure that the bad guy robots were red. And so I did use the color commands and then would save the games. I also saved the games when I would change them to make my character faster or make the gun have unlimited bullets or whatever, things like that. So I would save those so that I could come back and play them again and change them more. But that was the intro to programming.
That's
And
incredible. How old were you when you started programming then?
it must have been around somewhere between like I was almost 5 or almost 6, something
That's
around that
incredible.
time frame. Yeah.
That's very early.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
We had a TI machine with a tape recorder back in the late 80s. Mostly credit to my older brother
nice.
who was really into it. And it was incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was fun. I enjoy it. I wish I still had that thing, and maybe one day I will go on eBay and buy one. The Panasonic JR200U. I will never forget that computer.
Classic.
But yeah, that's where I started. But no, so for me, I've been in tech. One of the things I've said to when I started at Vestmark is like this is really my first real foray into fintech at all. I've been one of my first programming jobs was at Sovereign Bank, which is a bank that got bought by Santander. But I didn't really know that I was in fintech at the time. I was just an order taking software developer at the time. So I've spent my time just building IoT platforms. Like I was at Xively, which was a part of LogMeIn, and we built this really great enterprise grade IoT platform and working on AI systems like at Alexa. So some people might have heard of Alexa. It was the only job I had where my mom actually understood what I was working on. And
So you work on a timer. Is that what?
on the timer, yes, that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
once described it as I was at one of these parties where you're supposed to say what you do without saying what you do. And I said, "Oh, I work on the world's most expensive system for playing Baby Shark." And
I'm just impressed mine didn't go off with you saying
yeah,
the name so many times. Yeah.
well, maybe we trained it so that my voice wouldn't make it trigger anymore while I was working there. I don't know. It was,
I'd like to
we,
train it so my voice doesn't make it go off anymore.
we had them everywhere in the office, and they were all muted all the time because you were always talking about it, and it was always
Yeah.
an
That's
issue.
incredible. I
Yeah.
remember the number one review if you were to buy an Alexa on Amazon is I have two daughters named Amazon and Alexa. Should I buy this product? Right? It's just a joke review.
You could also name it computer. You could call it
You
computer.
can.
That's
And
the
Okay.
other
Ziggy,
cool thing.
right? I think
But
I think there's computer, Ziggy, Alexa.
That must be new.
Ziggy's got to be new. When I left Amazon, we had Alexa, Amazon, computer, and Echo were the four
Interesting.
choices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Look,
it's
Then
interesting because you
it's
worked there
going. Is it
before.
going? Sorry.
Alexa, buy James a Bugatti. So it's happening.
Yeah.
looking it up.
So it's interesting you worked there before the Chat GPT moment, right? Like, I mean, Alexa was so early to this world of chat-based AI, right? And obviously a lot of ML in the background, but not LMs necessarily, right? And
Yeah,
so
that's
I
right.
think that's really fascinating how, you guys were really pushing the envelope there. And yeah, and so I guess when you joined Vestmark, what was the AI maturity level? Were you sort of starting from scratch or was anything in motion? I would love to hear sort of your experience coming in.
Yeah, so when I was joining, there was definitely an appetite for AI, but a question about like how do you start and where do we start? What is safe was really the big question on everyone's mind, and how do we do something with AI that's safe? Most importantly, and keeps our clients safe. But there was also questions like there were real debates people were having at the time. It was like, well, if AI can see our code, does that mean that everyone's going to be able to reproduce Vestmark because now AI has seen it and trained itself on there? And I was like, you guys are like, let's
Mm,
have some conversations about what's actually happening here.
mm,
But there was an appetite. There was a person who was already here. He's not with us anymore, but there was a guy named Leo that was already at Vestmark. And he was working on innovation projects, basically like things where we knew we wanted to try stuff out and we needed somebody with some discipline to go try them out. And so he had gotten started on several AI initiatives just to figure out what's possible, like what could some of this stuff do. And some of that like bore fruit and turned into after I arrived, he and I worked together and turned some of that into real AI capability. So one of his ideas that he had early on was, could a large language model reasonably drive a computer? And not long after he asked that question, the whole computer use thing sort of started showing up, and we saw, yeah, it definitely can. But then there was the question of reliability. There was the question of context windows, which was a really big problem at the time because we weren't dealing with context windows the way we are now. And I think I think Sonnet must have been Sonnet 3 at the time as
mm,
where we were at. It was definitely early days. And so we were trying to figure out how to get reliable computer use with those much more limited large language model systems. And Leo and some folks on his
Just
team
to
were
interrupt, Freedom. Are we
yeah,
are we clearly in a period where like anybody who's in AI all the time, instead of saying this was 6 months ago or 8 months ago, we define it by like it was Sonnet 3,
the
it
era
was
of
yeah,
Sonnet 4.5, it
age of
was the
Sonnet
pivot
3.
to Sonnet 4.6. This is when Opus 4.7 and Opus 4.8 came out today, which will date
today,
exactly when we
big
recorded
news.
this.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
sorry to interrupt.
No,
I
you're
I
right.
think it's funny. Like that's how we describe things now.
I think that's right. I mean, we started there. We kind of started there with the in the Chat GPT era, right? Because we were talking about GPT 3, and then 3.5 was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And then by GPT 4, we realized everything was changed. Everything
Yep.
was going to be different.
That was a big milestone.
It
Yeah.
was.
And then the
And
Gemini 3 moment, that was definitely a moment that people,
yeah,
started paying attention to Gemini. And then I think Opus, Sonnet 3.5 maybe, and then maybe
yeah.
Opus were the ones that actually like, that was what propelled Claude Code into.
Half our audience, which is 6 people, are currently going, "What the hell are they talking about?" And the other had an absolute agreement.
Yeah. Well, I think the other half are totally geeking up out about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think the computer use you talked about, and for those who don't know, that's where like the AI actually manages the mouse and your keyboard on your computer. It is a crazy breakthrough I mean, I think your colleague or former colleague was right to focus on it because I think once it actually works, it's incredible
Yeah.
what it unlocks because you can actually start giving your computer an objective function. You can say, I want to do this thing, and you can get it could be a really ambitious big thing. And just use whatever you want to do it. And here are your guardrails. Obviously, you don't want to go off those rails. And the fact that it could actually use absolutely anything on your computer to get that job done is a little bonkers, right? I use it for testing the knapsack application, and it literally just opens and, basically just like, a tester would, does everything it needs to do, reads the logs, see what's broken, and then it fixes them and then repeats that over and over again
Yeah.
all day long. And you would never be able to do that before, right?
That's right.
And I've heard of other people who like give it a marketing job and it just goes off and does the marketing job without worrying about APIs or MCPs or any of the other wiring you normally need to do,
That's
which
the
is
big
really
thing,
crazy.
and it's also a major security concern for everybody on the other side,
Mm.
right? And for any organization that opens the door to this, which is that now logins, systems that don't talk to one another, you can easily I mean, look, a human could always pretty much do it. There was copy paste, there's lots of different ways to get data, but now you've really kind of opened Pandora's box on like these two systems don't talk. Well, we can copy something from here and put it here. I can
Yeah.
copy something from my
Yeah.
work and put it into this
There's
personal
no way to
tool.
control it, to be really clear. I mean, you're basically emulating human behavior. So, you can try your best to block
Yeah.
the bots, but really it looks a lot like human. So there's really
Yeah.
hardly any way to control it. And do you want to, right? Like maybe this is the future that agents are going to be using these SaaS tools a lot more than humans.
Well, it brings us to the thought of like this is something we discussed before the call, and it's not really the first time, which is, you kind of treat your in our case, we were talking about our agents, but you kind of treat your agents like human employees, right? You set up the guardrails the same way you would, that sort of thing. And this is something similar. Like if a human could have already done it, yes, there is some new exposure surface, right? But like if a human could have already copy pasted it, if a human could have already done that, it didn't exactly open something new. It made it easier, which
Yeah.
changes things, but it didn't create like a vulnerability that didn't previously exist. And so I think people have to keep it in perspective a little bit and then figure out how to put the guardrails the best you can
Yeah.
around that.
I think a lot of that anxiety is more around the early days of large language models where hallucinations were so prevalent that that was the whole news cycle about AI was look at this ridiculous thing that ChatGPT imagined.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
ChatGPT thought Abraham Lincoln is still alive. Ha ha, ha, isn't that funny? And I think you still see that kind of thing in the news cycle today, but not to the same extent, but it overlooks what I think is the more interesting thing about large language models, which is it isn't the knowledge that's encoded in the facts-based knowledge that's encoded in the large language model itself. Like, sure, it's kind of cool to have a thing you can ask a question and it might know the answer. What's really interesting is when you give it a tool to do a job. When you actually say, hey, I have a thing that needs to be done. Can you make sure that this button gets pressed every day at exactly this time? And that's something that a large language model can do very reliably, right? Because it doesn't build up a big context that blows out as it does it. It simply says, I've got a task, I complete the task, I look at the output. If it's satisfactory, then I do the next task. That's something that people who are still very skeptical about this technology oftentimes don't fully understand because they haven't either they haven't built something like this, which I don't blame them for not having built something like this unless they're a software engineer, in which case, what are you waiting for?
Uh,
Or they haven't seen one constructed, and so they don't really know that this is where the state of the art in large language models is. It's not about the facts. A great example of this, as we were, exploring how to use large language models in a security context, right? Like, how do we use a large language model to verify the security of the code in the software that we write? Well, if you just give a large body of code to Claude and say, please find me all of the security vulnerabilities in this, Claude will undoubtedly return some vulnerabilities if there are any, and it will undoubtedly return some vulnerabilities that aren't really vulnerabilities at all because you've told it to give you vulnerabilities. It's just going to figure out how to complete the task that you've done. But even if it's finding lots of vulnerabilities because you have them, it won't find them all. It will stop at some point and say, like, here are the vulnerabilities. If instead I say, Claude, here is a suite of tools that we use to identify vulnerabilities in software, which we already use today, humans typically use them, then Claude can operate those tools on the code base and get the output from those tools and say, here are all the vulnerabilities that we found. Would you like me to write up the tickets to get these things fixed? And then the next step is, would you like me to spin up agents to go and do the work from those tickets? So it's by switching it from relying solely on what is known by the large language model in its trained memory, and
Mm.
instead saying, "You're a novice. I'm gonna treat you like a novice, and I'm just gonna give you a tool." You get a much better experience.
I
Yeah, I think it's
completely
like the analogy is you learning history by memorizing facts, and then you get called out for not knowing a fact versus you having
Yeah,
being a good analytical thinker, right?
that's
And
right.
given some the facts, you can actually be really good at something, right? I think I find that similar. I also think all that buzz about like when AI got something wrong, there's a bit of cope from people who are just maybe justifiably nervous about AI and want
Yeah,
to find a way to diminish it.
well, also some just don't know how to use it quite yet, right?
that's
Like
right.
there is a learning curve. It's not just like put in a basic search query or a basic prompt. Like it's give it the right context and then you graduate to giving it tools and memory layers and a host of
Absolutely.
other things.
Yeah.
But yeah, most people who are just dabbling with it don't get great results and it's user, right?
Yeah,
It's not and it's not their fault, but like it's a learning curve.
that's
Well, it
right.
implies a use case, like even that specific thing, it implies the superpowered search box use case, right? Which is like this, just the user interface we're used to as a search box, and so we use as a superpowered search box. But actually, I think the next wave is what we've been talking about is AI employee. Like you treat it like an employee, and you have it go do things, like you just said. Go use these tools, go do a bunch of stuff, which is far better than a search box, far more powerful, has a lot more leverage. I
Dude,
think it's still going to screw up, but I think it's just so much more powerful.
I have a question piggybacking off of the workflow you just described, which I think was a good one, right? Where one, you discussed giving it a different type of goal, right? And it was more goal focused than like go find this problem, right? So you gave it a goal, you gave it tools, etc. But then the part that caught my attention was, and it was essentially you saying, and then go write the ticket and then spin up agents to go fix it. And so like the write the ticket part to me feels a little more like that's because that's how we do it, how we've historically done it, right? And so this is part question, more commentary, I think. But a lot of the use of AI that I'm seeing, and this is kind of what upsets me with like some of the platforms that we look at, is that they're just figuring out how to do the same thing faster
Yeah,
instead of saying, we have a completely new tool that's far more powerful. We don't need to do the same thing. In our case, we're a highly regulated industry. There are some things from an auditing perspective or things like that that are going to have to move a little slower or still happen in some way for auditors to be happy and for people to get comfortable. But are you at Vestmark looking at that? How do we really utilize this technology, not just make the same things faster? Because that's what I see with almost every initial, use
yeah.
of AI when a new firm starts implementing it.
You know what's interesting, James, about that is, I mean, you're definitely right, right? Like having a ticketing system, for example, or keeping track of your tickets is do you still need something like that in an agentic sense? I would argue yes, first of all, but I think that before I get to that, I would say the interesting thing is it's very difficult sometimes to get software engineers to actually go write the tickets as humans. Like humans will have this moment where they're like, I can fix this in less time than it takes me to write the ticket.
Right? What's the
And
point?
I've been a software engineer for the majority of my life, and I can say I have had that exact feeling so many times, and even in previous jobs, made the choice to I'm just going to go fix the thing, and I'm not going to write the ticket. I think that agents still deserve access to a workflow management system, and I think agents appreciate is the wrong word because it probably over humanizes them, but they're more effective when you give them a tool for keeping track of what's being done. They need some way to know how far have we gotten. So imagine,
It's also like writing's memory, right? You're
Yeah,
you're
it's a
basically
memory layer.
having a memory file that you can reach back to. I also was thinking
exactly.
as you were mentioning that the large part of this is probably observability, where you want to see what the agent is doing and what they intended to do, and did they do the thing they intended to do? Because I mean, really, it's like this whole idea of agents may at some point come up with their own language because English is so inefficient. So they
Yeah.
might talk to each other in their own language, which is going to be really scary because we're not going to be able to decode
Yeah.
it. But I think like, yeah, observability is so important when they're doing things. Is there, maybe this is just a terminology thing, but what's the difference between writing a ticket and just creating a PR where the agent is saying what it's going to do and then approving the PR?
So a ticket is more than the PR is the work is done. And for those who are listening or watching, PR is a pull request. So if I've got a chunk of code and I want to get it into the code base, the safe way to do that, and the way that we do it at Vestmark, is the engineer will create a pull request where they're asking other engineers to review the work and pull that into the code. It should come loaded up with information about the code changes, and it usually does. But there is oftentimes other information in the ticket besides this is the problem and this is the proposed solution. It's also a place for discussion. It's also a place to store facts that are discovered as you attempt to resolve an issue. So if you use a tool like Claude Code or Claude Cowork, you'll watch the system actually go and discover the problems or the issues that it's seeing in the source material, and then it does the work, and then all of that sort of disappears.
Yeah.
If you can give it the opportunity to record some of that, then the next agent that comes along can pull that into context and be like, oh, well, last time somebody saw this issue, this is what was this, it was like this, and then I was able to resolve it in this way. You can save yourself some tokens and maybe some time by keeping that in history and being able to honestly, in a regulated space, you get to also give yourself some defensibility to say, well, why did you make this change?
Yeah.
Well, here's what
Gave
we
it
discovered in the
audits go.
process. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
But I think we've talked about your origin story and sort of some of the stuff you've been doing behind the scenes, but I actually would love to understand your main quest, which is like, building AI into the core product at Vestmark. And
Yeah.
considering it's sort of a deep infrastructure product, I'm just curious what your thinking is on, how AI will become visible to end users of Vestmark.
I think what we're thinking about at Vestmark is, what does the future of this work look like when agents become widely available and accessible and are empowered to take actions that currently are reserved only for human operators? Today, you think about a back office or a middle office operator, and they sit down at a desk, that's maybe got a couple of monitors on it. But in most cases, I'm seeing like 3 or more monitors these days with lots of screens loaded up. And the job is, I look at this, and then I make a decision, and then I take the next step. And building software whose only job is to give you something to look at and a way to take some action based on what you saw. To me, I think that's going to change quite a lot when you've got an agent who can get that information and doesn't necessarily need it visually, because an agent could just read the raw data that's behind that and then help support making the decision. So we're imagining that future state and then trying to work backwards from there. What needs to be true between now and then in order to make that future come true and to make sure that Vestmark's clients are getting the ability to take advantage of that. So the first areas we're looking at are, what are some of the jobs where having access to an agent that's doing some of the work for you can really enable and accelerate a person. So two great examples that we came up with that we started working on as soon as we discovered them. The first one is a system which supports recon agentically. So, for those who are unfamiliar, every account that's being managed needs to go through some reconciliation process regularly. For us, it's nightly. And we want to make sure that whatever Vestmark believes about the account's positions lines up with what the custodian believes is true about the account's positions. And oftentimes we find out that they don't. And so it's the job of our clients, or in some cases, it's our job to figure out why there is some disagreement. Maybe there's a coac that hasn't been processed yet, or maybe there's some other thing that's been processed by Vestmark, but the custodian hasn't gotten insight into that yet. And so we have to go do some research and look at what's happened and what's changed, and then figure out, well, who's got the right number so that we can get the account ready to trade in the morning. That work is largely all about taking a look at what we know about the account, what the custodian knows about the account, and a judgment framework. And with those three things together, you can reasonably come up with what should the right position for this account be. Right now, that's something that is a very boring and very tedious job that humans wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning to pursue, to make sure that accounts are ready to trade. And it's an area that we believe there's an opportunity for agents to support. Initially, by proposing all of the fixes and then letting the human operators accept those proposed break fixes, but ultimately learning from what the human operators do with that information, so that we can get it so that the human operators don't have to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning to do this anymore. They can wake up and say like, oh, there's only 3 accounts that the agents weren't able to support, and they can take care of those. So I
Mm.
think that that's one area we see a ton of opportunity. We see that expanding beyond recon into a lot of other back office supporting roles. But on the other side of that, like going all the way to the front of the house, Vestmark has over the last 3 years started to provide tools and technology that make its way right into the hands of advisors. So the Vestmark Advisor Suite is now available for firms that are looking for that kind of technology, and that gave us some exposure to the day in the life of a financial advisor and the kinds of pain that they feel. And as we've talked with them, some of the things we hear from them are it's not about the mundane work at all. It's not that they have work that they don't want to be doing. It's that they are desperately trying to grow their book of business because that's how you make more money. But they care so much about their clients, they don't want to give up that attention that they give to their clients, right? So you've maybe got 50 clients in your book, and you really to achieve your goals, you need to grow that to like 200. Really give that attention you want to give to like the top 15. How do you change it so that you can give all of the clients in your book of business the kind of attention that that top 15 is able to get? And so we've been building this product we recently launched called Pulse. And what Pulse will do is it will take a look at what's happening in the market. It'll take a look at what's happening in the portfolios you manage, takes a look at your CRM data, and combines that into proactive insights to say like, hey, like, you know what? NVIDIA just had a really interesting day. It's going to impact these 3 clients. The last time this happened, Margaret called you up. Do you want to preemptively give her a call if you want to? Just tap right here, right? So instead of being the advisor that finds out at the end of the day or the beginning of the day what's going on, you just have something in your pocket that's saying, hey, you might be interested in this and taking this next step. So giving that kind of power to advisors so that they can be the advisor that they want to be, and manage a growing book without having to give up on providing great service. That's something we thought was really important to focus on as well. And there's a ton of opportunity in between to use AI to do this stuff, to do different types of tasks that we're discovering every day. We're looking at roles in the portfolio manager space. I think there's a lot of interesting work that we can support portfolio managers with there as well. So you'll see a lot more coming from us, but Pulse is one of our first truly agentic products. We're really proud of it. It's really cool. I love getting a chance to show it to people when I'm out having drinks or whatever at an event or something.
That's pretty cool. And then you mentioned at the top that you're experimenting with OpenClaw and Hermes a little bit, which
Yeah.
are sort of cutting edge agentic framework. So what are you guys doing there?
Yeah, so we've got a pilot we're running right now. So I would say it's very constrained because we are extremely focused on governance. Like how do we work with tools like OpenClaw and Hermes, but also keep things safe? So we've racked up a small cluster of Mac Minis in our lab on an isolated network. But what we're doing is we're genuinely treating them like virtual employees. So each one of them gets its own authentication. It gets its own sort of access to its own email, its own calendaring, and all of those things. And then they can be communicated with over Slack. So I could say, Mark, this is your assistant, and you give it a name, and it doesn't read your email. It reads what you delegate to it. In the same way that, say, if I were to hire you an intern or a junior employee to support you as an assistant, it does the same thing and has the same kinds of controls wrapped around it so that we can pay attention to what it's doing. We can cut off its access at a moment's notice, but also can give you access to something that can do something useful for you, like recognize when you've got 3 meetings at the same time on your calendar, and start reaching out to those people who are trying to book your time and say, hey, can we find a different spot? Right? Like those are very useful use cases that are easy to do.
So they have their own email addresses. Like how deep do you go on this?
Well, like I said, it's in pilot phase right now. So right now, that's what we're starting with,
Mm.
and giving it its own email and paying for its own Microsoft license so that it has the ability to interact with this. And the Microsoft has a really great delegation system. So you can delegate it. You can delegate to any other Microsoft user in your domain the ability to see your calendar or edit your calendar or manage the calendar fully. And so you can do that in a way that gives you some safety and separation, but also allows you to have an assistant that's actually assisting and not just telling you what you should do.
Freedom from From what you guys are doing using these open source tools, is this really kind of just experimentation, right? Are you just thinking about where are the barriers? What could we possibly do? And then you'd go build this yourself? Or do you see a world where, start with Hermes and branch off and like Hermes is actually in use at Vestmark to
Yeah,
some
I
extent?
so I'll say this. I wouldn't call it an experiment because I think an experiment has an expected failure state, right? You kind of expect that it will or won't work. I know from personal experience that using claw type, like OpenClaw, NemoClaw, Hermes agents to support actual work, it does work. There's no doubt in my mind that that exists. So the pilot is really to figure out how can we do it safely. It's not about whether or not we do it. Now, in terms of I think another part of your question is this a thing that Vestmark ultimately builds and manages for itself, or is there an opportunity for us to say buy and operate something? I think that really comes down to a question. Like our business is really about supporting our clients with great technology. So if there's something that we think we can do really well for our clients, then we're going to look for an opportunity to take what we know how to do well and turn that into a product. If it's not really, if the objective isn't about that, then we're probably going to look for a partner who can do it, as well or better than us to support our business. It really depends. The thing that we're up against though is that at this early stage still, right? It's weird to say early stage because we're about 4 years into this, uh, you know, uh, LLM journey at this point. So it doesn't feel that early to me. But it still seems nascent enough that there aren't a lot of off the shelf. I can just grab this, plug it into my environment, and I have a up and running thing that works. There are things that sound like that until you start asking questions like, "Well, do you have SOC 2? What are the guardrails? What's the governance? How do you deal with things like indirect prompt injection?" You know, uh, and there's some new certifications that are out there. I think it's ISO ISE, is it 42001 or something like that? Like, we're looking at that, and so once you start getting into that, it's like, okay, there isn't anything I can buy, so I still have to go and invest in building the technology that we need. The upshot of that ends up being that, we become a more competent and more, AI literate organization, so what we learn building the things that we need for ourselves
Yeah.
very quickly translates into tech that we can then deploy and build for our clients.
'Cause you're building it from the ground up. Yeah. I mean,
Right.
at Knapsack, we're definitely trying to fill that need, but we just started launching the product. So
Yeah.
really interesting to hear that you say that there's not a lot out there. It makes me feel reassured.
Yeah, you're in a good spot.
Yeah, it's gonna be good. So I do need to take off soon, but we have some lightning round questions we like to ask people before we close. And so maybe I'll kick off with one, and James, do you want to kick off with another afterwards?
Go for it.
So, a standard one we like to ask is, what do you feel is the most overhyped and underhyped sort of AI technology or product right now?
Overhyped is AI note taking. I think is it's you can build it yourself in about 5 minutes if you want it, and you could buy one of the 1,000 AI note takers that are out there. I had an AI note taker before large language models, and it worked fine too. They're nice, but like honestly, it's a 5 minute Claude code prompt, and you've got your own AI note taker. Underhyped. Man, that is a tough one, but I think massively underhyped is the power that comes from fine tuning an open source model that is specific to a task. The models that exist today. So Opus 4.8 just came out. I haven't tried it yet. I'm sure it's phenomenal. I'm a big 4.7 fan, and it can do real work, but it's also slow and overkill for a lot of things. So once you get to a specific task, like for example, we were talking about recon earlier. I want to do thousands of recon operations, every minute. I don't want to
Mm,
have to wait for the long round trip. So once I know how that recon operation should work, being able to fine tune a model that only knows how to do recon, I think that's the next step because then
mm.
I can go from processing hundreds of tokens, per second to thousands of tokens per second on infrastructure that we manage. So I think that's something that people probably underestimate, and it's easier than you think, but it takes more time than you think. So I think both of those things are true.
Very cool. I
Yeah.
mean, I have not heard that answer before, that underrated answer. So that's phenomenal.
Yeah, I like that one. All right. So, what is it kind of related, but what's one AI use case specifically in wealth management that you're excited about that you don't think others are really talking about yet?
Oh, man. I mean, I kind of alluded to this a little bit when I was talking about Pulse, but giving complex information simplified in a matter of moments as soon as it matters, that's something that's been very difficult. Like the distillation of complex concepts into something that you can instantly understand is something that AI has turned out to be really good at.
Mm.
And it's true. Every single one of us has a meeting that we're about to get on and we didn't fully prepare for, or something else has changed.
I got
And
one of those
boy,
coming up right now.
yeah. And it'd be great if I could just give me enough so I understand. I don't need all the details. I just need the understanding. And that is something that I think is going to be really, really powerful for all wealth managers across the roles in the spectrum.
I think that's a good place to. I know Mark's got to go, but I think that's a good place to wrap up because that's definitely what I see as kind of the future,
Yeah.
which is really moving to the synthesis of information and getting people much closer to like, here's what you need to know to make that decision to take that action. And to your point earlier, it's not about showing them a bunch of data when a lot of that can be synthesized and possibly analyzed better than you could have done anyway.
Yeah, and getting that right is good. I actually have 3 meeting prep reports for this next meeting that I should have been reading that I have not read. So it's
Sounds
not.
like
I mean,
too
I
many.
have a lot of meeting prep. It's just the time to then read the prep. I think Granola did something very clever in like shortening the meeting prep. They now have like 5 bullets. They did a really good job with their meeting briefing product. Speaking of note takers, I think they did a fairly good job there.
No shade to Granola. I think they've done note taking plus. I think note taking is a feature. It's not the whole product. I think Granola has done a really good job of showing what happens when the note taking is solved.
Yeah.
What else do you do? So I think
But
that
is it a defensible big business? I guess that's an outstanding question. But
remains to be seen. Yeah.
seem not something we're going to solve right now. But thank you very much for coming on, Freedom. Really appreciate it. And looking forward to seeing what you build next.
Awesome. Thanks so much. It was great talking with you both.
All right.
Same.
Thanks so much, Freedom.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Take care.